Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm finally ready to do my full review on this sucker. This is the Protech SNG Operator Series. Now, it's like any other Protech SNG, but it's not, because everything about it is black and it has a tritium insert on the button. That's what makes it an operator. So, I've had a lot of fun with this knife. A little bit of backstory, if you're not familiar with my history with Protech SNGs. I've actually owned a couple of them. I had a pretty basic one a long time ago. Then a few months ago, I got one of the hand-ground mirror polished. I think it's Mike Erie is the name of the guy who does those blades with the micarta show scale. I had a really pretty one, and I showed that here on the channel. It was a great knife, but it was just too pretty to keep and to use. And so when I decided to sell that one, I had decided I was going to be getting one of two versions to actually keep for myself long term. The first one was this, and the second one that I would have been open to was every now and then they'll do a run in micarta show scale ones, and they'll use the really cool GL Hansen & Sons micarta, like the Mexican blanket micarta is the specific version that I wish I had seen, but I also don't, because I'm glad I got this one. So it was either going to be one like that or this. And when I saw that River's Edge Cutlery got some of these, I just jumped on it. So, as always, when I get a knife from River's Edge Cutlery, I'll link to them down below. They are my favorite retailer to buy knives from, and they're just really awesome dudes over there. They're great supporters of the channel at this point. They've helped out with giveaways, and they just do a lot for me. So, they will be linked down below. They don't have these anymore. These tend to sell out real quick when people get them. I feel like Protech has made quite a few of the operator version of the SMG in particular, but it's a really sweet knife. So anyway, let's talk about kind of this version and why I picked it, and then I'll just kind of go through my typical knife review stuff. I'll talk about carry and ergos and all of that fun stuff. So this version, the only reason why I wanted it is because I think it looks the coolest. Will this version be any higher performance than any other version of this knife? No. In fact, due to its all-coatedness, I worry a little bit more about carrying it, because I really don't want to scratch up this coating just yet. I'm still kind of enjoying how pretty it looks, but this is going to be a user keeper for me, and so I have used it a fair bit. I just haven't used it all that hard yet, but I've used this model pretty hard, so I feel like I can already speak from experience on it. But yeah, I picked it because it looks cool. It's just everything on it is completely blacked out, and then you get the little tritium insert on the push button there, and so this knife is literally radioactive. It's pretty sweet. It's the most tactical version of the knife. Everything is non-reflective, black, and it just looks kind of menacing. It's kind of cool in that way. I also have, let me grab it, the all blacked out version of the Protech Malibu, and the blacked out version of the Malibu isn't an operator series knife. Protech has done a lot of operator series knives. They've done the SNG, the TR4 and 5, I think. They've done the Godfather, a lot of them. And all of them are going to be all coated black and have the tritium button. This one doesn't have the tritium button, and it's not quite sterile like the operator ones are. The operator series have no markings on them whatsoever. No steel marking, no Protech branding, nothing. The all-black Malibu does have the Protech right there, and then if you look, probably the easiest if I show you this way, you can see it's stamped or laser etched with the steel marking there. So other than that, it's sterile, but it's not an operator. Would I love to find like a tritium button for it and kind of make it my own operator? Yes, that would be sweet. But this is a real, genuine operator here, and they look great together. I posted a picture yesterday on Instagram as of when I'm filming this, and it was of these two knives and my Chavez 229, the blackout version, which today, it's a bummer, but I traded that knife to a good friend for something really exciting that's on the way. So that knife is gone. It's part of why I really wanted to take that picture. Well, I still had all three just blacked out knives together. Anyway, I've still got the 2 blacked out Protechs, but the Chavez is gone. Anyway, people seemed to dig that picture. It performed remarkably well. A lot of engagement on that photo, and I can see why. I think there's something really, really cool about having just a totally blacked out knife. It's like Batman gear. I don't know, it's just cooler for some reason. So don't get me wrong, I've got plenty of knives with colored scales. I've got plenty in plain titanium and colored G10. I've got like an assortment of knives at this point, a bunch of materials and stuff, but something about seeing a knife, especially a knife that I already like, get an all blacked out treatment to make it kind of stand out against the other ones of the same thing. There's coolness to it. So that's why I picked this one. It is not going to have a functional advantage unless maybe you're on a SWAT team or something and you need a non-reflective dark piece of gear, so when you got your nods on and you're going through it's not going to reflect any light. I don't know how many people would fall into that category, but I bet almost everybody thinks this one looks really cool. So there you have it. So let's talk about the Protech SMG. What I say about this version is going to ring true for just about any version of the knife. And so we'll talk about why I like this knife, why I felt like I wanted to have one in the collection, and why I get such a kick out of it, and then also what the few shortcomings are that I think it has. So let's start by talking ergos. Strider SNG ergos are some of my favorite ergos, period. I really, really like the profile of the Strider handle. I like the forward choil. I like the way that it all works for my hand specifically. I know I've said it a lot in the past. It's probably good to say every now and then. I wear about a medium-sized glove. Every now and then it's large, depending on brand and stuff. But like in a mechanics wear glove, which are the gloves that I wear when I have them, I wear a medium, and they're great for me because I don't feel like there's too much length on the finger. I fill out medium gloves pretty well. I always say that as well, but I don't have tiny hands, but I don't have that big of hands either. Anyway, on an SNG, Protech or otherwise, this kind of primary grip position feels really good. The way you get this hump back here and the way that rests into my palm right there just feels really stable. This particular variant of the SMG being made by Protech and having aluminum scales, there's no machining on these or anything. Come on. What's happening? There we go. There's no machining on these or anything. They're not a grippy material, and so they're very slick, all things considered. But because of the shaping of this handle, I'm really locked into this knife, and I just love that profile. And then it gets even better because from here I can choke up into this spot, use this forward finger choil, have the rest of my fingers follow suit, and then it's just a different type of locked in, and for this I get a really good sense of control over the blade, so I feel like I can do really good detailed work with it, and I know I can. I've done it. This blade profile, by the way, is excellent. It's a really usable blade shape for me. We've got pretty much a flat back here, followed by a good amount of like little belly, but not too aggressive, not overly curved, and then it comes to a nice, fairly precise tip that's robust enough that I'm not worried about snapping it or anything like that. It's a pretty good thickness on the blade stock all throughout, and so it's just a very good usable blade shape. Plus I like that it's a flat grind. It comes up a decent amount of the blade. It gets actually decently thin-ish behind the edge. It's not like crazy thin, but for this being kind of a tactical knife, I feel like it's a pretty usable blade profile. That's one of the things as well that I really like about this one compared to the actual SNG. And I have one here, so I'll show you. The real SNG, at least in the variants I've had, have all, or at least that I've handled, I should say, have all had thicker blade stock than the Protech does. And I'm going to be doing a comparison between these two knives because I've got them both, why not? But I like that on the Protech they didn't use such a thick blade stock, because the construction of this knife, being all smooth, being aluminum, 154 cm, being an auto, this isn't the type of knife that I want to like take out into the woods. It's just not a knife that I would pick for that. And so I don't need like a crazy overly thick blade stock. This is just going to be doing EDC tasks for me, like city and around the house EDC tasks, right? Opening packages and processing cardboard, stuff like that. And so for that kind of classification of use, a thicker blade stock wouldn't help me. It would hurt me on this knife. Whereas the real Strider, I do feel like, is kind of an outdoorsy, woodsy knife. That's what I plan to do with it. And so that one kind of should have the thicker stock, in my opinion. But it's cool that this one, as an EDC option, not an adventure knife, just EDC knife is where I'd classify it. I feel like it's the kind of the better build. And when I do the comparison, I'll go deeper into that. But anyway, so we've got really good ergos. The blade profile is great. Speaking of which, let's just talk about cutting performance while I'm already right there. The blade is going to be 154 cm on any of the Protech versions that I've ever seen. If they've done any runs without 154 cm, I want to say, now that I'm thinking about it, I think they did a run at one point with titanium scales, and I think those had a different blade steel. Maybe it was 20 CV. I want to say Metal Complex has one of those. Anyways, that was a limited thing, and I don't think they're like making more of those often, if at all. And so in general, speaking about the Protech variant of the SMG, it's going to be 154 cm blade steel. 154 cm does not excite me one bit. I'd be lying if I said that it did. Is it terrible blade steel? No. 154 cm is fine. It doesn't bother me when it's on a knife. Once you get to certain price points, I feel like it gets a little hard to justify, sure. But even in the realm of like really high-end custom knives, a lot of custom makers are using 154 cm because from what I gather, it's kind of a pleasure to work with. I'm not a maker. I haven't worked with blade steel, so I can't speak to that. But in terms of its edge retention and toughness and all that, it's not like a front-runner steel at this point. That said, as an EDC knife steel, the type of tasks I do with my EDC knives, it's totally passable. So a nice thin stock, a good grind, comes with a fantastic factory edge on it. Protech is amazing at putting on really sharp edges. This knife is just a really good all-around cutter. It's not like insanely thin, like TRM blade steel thin, but it's thinner than PM2 stock thickness for sure. Like, it's just a good profile. So cutting performance, I've been super happy with. Ergos are one of my favorite things in the world, and let's move on. Although, I'm jumping all around. Before I move on from ergos completely, even though I kind of have, the one thing that bothers me ergonomically about this knife is the jimping. Not all of the jimping, but some of the jimping. Let's talk about the jimping that's really good. Back here, on this part of the handle, this jimping I quite like. That is a spot where the jimping is welcome to me, because in this grip, doesn't bother me. This grip, don't even feel it. But in a reverse grip, when I want to wrap my thumb around, around the top, or the bottom, but what is now the top of the handle, I'm getting in all kinds of trouble here, aren't I? When I wrap my thumb around here, which is what I do in a reverse grip, that feels really good. I like that there's that little bit of jimping there. It's not too aggressive, it's not tearing my finger up, but it locks me in a reverse grip. And these ergos in a reverse grip, this is one of my favorite knives in existence to hold in a reverse grip. It's just excellent in that grip. So I like that that jimping is there. However, the jimping up here on the spine of the blade, I don't like it one bit. It bothers me. I wish that jimping wasn't there. I think that is an example of bad jimping. To be fair, that is jimping that is also present, just like on the Protech, on the real one. So I see how they got there, although on the Protech, if I had to guess, I think it's actually because this blade stock is thinner, it's less comfortable to press my thumb into this jimping than it is on the real Strider, which is funny. I just don't like jimping a lot of the time anyways, especially when the ergos are this good on their own that I feel so locked in. I just don't need it. It would bother me less as well right up here where it's still thick, like where it's way thicker than the blade stock is, obviously, where we've got it on the handle. It doesn't bother me so much because it's just wider. It's not as toothy going into my finger. But here on the spine of the blade, it's just, I know it's nitpicky, but I don't like that jimping. So yeah, ergonomically, that's about all I'll say about it. It's good in just about any grip that you can possibly put it in. It's exceptional in a reverse grip. One of my favorite knives, period. in a reverse grip at all, ever. It's got a great forward choil to choke up. It's just a win there. And cutting performance is quite good as well. I feel like for the class of knife this is in, it cuts really, really well. Alright, next let's talk about carry. So here's the interesting thing about this knife in particular. It carries the same as any old Strider will. I realize I'm grabbing this a lot. I'm going to be doing a comparison anyways, but the clip, everything is identical to how it is on a real Strider, right? But that's not so much what I'm getting at. Is carry on this one has a disadvantage compared to even like that real Strider. Even though the clip placement is the same, it's a little bit thicker, but that's not even what I'm getting at. It's more so the fact that this one is coated, and on the entire knife, right? I have to be very cognizant. This is going to sound funny to people who don't share the same issue, but if I'm wearing pants that have like riveted pockets, which a lot of my pants do, I can't carry this knife in those pants because this knife sticks so high out of my pocket. See, you've got that much sticking out, that when there are rivets on my pockets, the rivets of my coin pocket sit like right here, like right on this kind of face of the show scale, and they will scuff it all up. Now, to some people that might not bother them at all. The whole use your stuff crowd are going to be like, well, it's a knife, who cares if it gets scuffed? I don't want this to get scuffed for no reason. I love knives that have deep carry pocket clips. It's my preference. If this had a deep carry pocket clip, it would be so much better in pocket to me. Not just the fact that it would then be out of the way of any rivets that could scuff it, but it would also just, that's my preference for carry. I want it to go deep in my pocket. Now on the real one, it's just G10 on that side, so I worry much less about it getting scuffed compared to this. And that's really the only difference. It's going to carry the same depth, etc. But the real one is actually a little bit thinner, and it's kind of contoured, whereas this one's a little bit boxier. So take that for what it's worth. This one doesn't carry quite as well as the real Strider SMG does, in my opinion. But it's not awful. If I'm wearing pants that don't have rivets, nothing about the way it carries bothers me. I'd still prefer it to be deep carry, but there's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, just the way that this sits in pocket, if I do have rivets, it's not good. So in terms of its like weight and feel in pocket, this knife is really light, especially considering it's made of aluminum. It's got a thinner blade stock. So even though this one, the scales are thinner and the blade stock is thicker, they end up weighing about the same. I haven't put them on a scale. I don't even own a little scale that I could put knives on. But to me, like in hand, they've got to be within a half an ounce of each other. They're really close, and so the weight for each of them is pretty comfortable. And this one it's pleasant to have in pocket. Again, if you don't have rivets. So that's carry, cutting, and ergos. What else do I normally talk about? Carry, cutting, ergos, and looks. I think that's what I normally talk about. Gosh, that trip to Portland really threw me off. I'm out of my groove filming these things. Anyways, looks. I think that goes back to why I said I picked this version to begin with. This knife looks really, really great to me. I think just the visual appearance of this knife is incredibly pleasant. It looks mean, it looks aggressive, but it's not like overly textured all over the place. It just has a really cool vibe to it. Another thing that's cool, I know a lot of people wonder about like the orientation of the tritium. It's super easy to adjust. If you weren't aware and you have one of these, while the knife is open, all you have to do is depress the button and spin your finger, and it goes right with it. And then it stays put fairly easily as well. It's not like it comes out of alignment very easily. So if you just get it lined up to where you want it, kind of leave it there, then you're good. But it's really easy to adjust. So yeah, in the looks department, this knife looks fantastic. It's just a really cool looking knife. I think there's an argument for this looking as cool or cooler than any of the real Strider configurations that I've seen. In fact, if I compare it to the one that I have, I think this all blacked out rendition of the knife looks cooler in a lot of ways than the real Strider does. Obviously there are some differences in construction and all that, but it's just a cool looking knife. So I quite like this knife. I knew pretty much everything about this based on real experience with former ones that I owned before getting this version. And so getting this one is just kind of like, now I've landed on the one that I want. You know what? Also, I'm a crazy person. Looks is not what I normally talk about. I literally thought that's what it was because I'm... Anyways, the other thing that I normally talk about, goodness, is action. And how have I not talked about action on this knife yet? I don't know. This action is great if you like out the side autos. Protech, in my opinion, right now, makes the best, most consistent out the side automatic actions that are on the market. It is super fun to deploy. It is just the push button, as you saw, is marked by tritium on this one. All you got to do, press that button, and bam, it flies out, deploys reliably every time, locks up every time. I have 0 side to side, 0 front to back. This is a great lockup, and the action is fun. Autos are fun to deploy. What autos aren't, in my opinion, is fun to close. If I pick up another knife that's on bearings and is a frame lock, and I want to close it, this can be fun. That I can just kind of drop it shut, right? I do it all with one hand. That's very nice. On an auto, that's not going to work. So you have options. You can either kind of get it started, which can be awkward, and then like get it done with one hand, but it's awkward. Or imagine this is my leg. I can press it up against my leg down here, or I can just use 2 hands. That's what it is. But it's never, for me, fun to close an auto. It's just, unless it's a double action, like an out the front, that's more fun because it's doing all the work for you in both directions. Out the sides inherently are not going to be very fun to close. But in terms of deployment, this one, just like any other Protech, is snappy and quick. Certain Protech models seem to have different, I imagine they use a variety of different springs depending on the size and design of a knife. And so this one certainly isn't like the hardest hitting Protech that I've ever had, but it's still, I mean, it's still very snappy and very firm, and it's a great action. So I guess that's actually everything I have to say. And for some reason I threw looks in there thinking that that was something that I normally talk about, which I do talk about looks. It's just not like one of the categories that I try to methodically make myself bring up. Anyway, this has been an interesting one. I'm getting back in the groove here, guys. It is a new year. We're having fun with it. Anyway, this is the Protech SNG Operator Series, and it is my Protech SMG. I love this knife. I really like it. I plan on keeping this knife long term. It's just a lot of fun. Much like many of my knives, as I said in the very beginning, I got this one from River's Edge Cutlery, and they will be linked down below because I always appreciate them. They are great dudes over there, and I just encourage people, as you get into this hobby, or if you're into it, support dealers like River's Edge Cutlery. There are a number of good ones, and I'd be happy to share with anybody who asks who my favorites are, and I'll make a video soon kind of listing them. But if you're in the hobby, you find yourself buying knives, there are small businesses out there filled with really good people who are working really hard. And River's Edge Cutlery is my favorite for a lot of reasons, but the people there are definitely the main reason for it. They're really cool dudes who are engaged with the community and who use their gear and care about this hobby. So I'll just say that. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I will see you guys on the next one, I'm sure, and you can look forward to the comparison between this one and the real Strider. I'll kind of talk about, go more in depth even than I did here, the differences between the two and which ones have better strengths and which ones have certain weaknesses, and kind of I'll try to come to some sort of a consensus as to which one I actually think is better, because for a long time I thought this was the Strider for me. Like, I wasn't all that interested in getting an actual Strider made by Strider. I liked the way Protech was doing it. But this one that I've got now is such a good spec for me that it's kind of making me rethink that. And so I'm going to have to toss them around a little bit and see which one I think is actually like the perfect Strider for me, which one I really prefer, gun to my head, you know. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I know this one has gotten real crazy and off into the weeds a little bit, but appreciate you watching as always, and I'll see you on the next one.